Volkswagen's flagship model, the Touareg, is a large luxury SUV that in third generation guise is smarter looking, safer, better equipped and much more sophisticated. It's luxurious and refined on tarmac and better than you might expect it to be off it. True, it still can't offer more than 5 seats, but otherwise this underrated contender has been hugely improved and now offers a very complete package.
Welcome to the most sophisticated Volkswagen ever made. This third generation Touareg luxury SUV is the brand's flagship model and it sets fresh standards for the Wolfsburg maker. As you'd expect it would, this car is, after all, the least expensive way into the MLM, modular longitudinal matrix platform technology that the Volkswagen Group's ritziest brands use for their most desirable large SUVs, which is why the chassis used here is shared with a Porsche Cayenne. Some sections of the driveline are borrowed from a Lamborghini Urus. There's exotic suspension from a Bentley Bentayga and semi-autonomous driving tech from a fashionable Audi Q8. Quite a CV. But then the Touareg has always featured sophisticated underpinnings. The first generation Type 7L version, launched in 2002 and named after a North African tribe, shared much of its development with Volkswagen's vastly over-engineered Phaeton boardroom-level luxury saloon. The Mark II Type 7P series model, introduced in 2010, was one of the cars that pioneered hybrid technology for its maker. So it was natural that this third generation car, first shown in early 2018, would continue to push the boundaries, not least in the way it looks. The chromed visage comes courtesy of the way that it's been primarily styled for China, its biggest market, and it's also larger, more luxurious and more road orientated than before. And still a 5-seater, which in itself is interesting given that key competitors from Volvo and Audi offer space for 7. Volkswagen points out that its emphasis here is also shared by recently launched direct rivals like the 4th generation BMW X5 and the 2nd generation Mercedes GLE, cars that will need to take this Mark III model Touareg much more seriously than its predecessor. Not least because it offers one of the classiest leather-lined interiors ever seen at this price point, complete in its priciest forms with a sophisticated so-called InnoVision cockpit incorporating 2 huge digital screens. It's a Volkswagen then that you could really aspire to. Time to test it. There's a certain amount of pragmatism in the way that the Volkswagen Group has developed this Mark III model Touareg to sit amongst its other large SUV offerings. I mean, don't give it 7 seats like an Audi Q7 or wood trim like a Bentley Bentayga or, which is what concerns us in this section, super sharp handling like a Porsche Cayenne. Not that this Volkswagen has been denied the key elements of dynamic technology which distinguish its group stablemates. On the contrary, buyers who add in the professional chassis pack will get the active roll compensation system which features on that Bentley. This setup's active anti-roll bars do a lot to cancel out body roll at speed through sharper bends. Touareg folk can even have the rear axle steering system that you'll find on the exotic Lamborghini Urus, which at speed gives you sharper corner turning as the rear wheels turn fractionally in the same direction as those at the front. In addition, for urban motoring, the same EAWS setup works in reverse at speeds below 23 miles an hour, making the rear wheels turn in the opposite direction to those at the front. This reduces the turning circle radius by a whole metre to just 11.19 metres, which, to give you some perspective, is rather incredibly, given this car's size, almost the same as you get in a Golf. All of this cutting-edge technology costs extra, mind you, as does the air suspension system we're trying here, a 2-chamber setup rather than the more sophisticated 3-chamber system that features further up the Volkswagen Group hierarchy. Perhaps that's why it doesn't waft you over porous surfaces and speed humps with quite the magic carpet-like demeanour that you might hope for from such a system. Still, the way that it automatically lowers itself by up to 25 millimetres on the highway at speeds of over 74 miles an hour is neat. That's the kind of environment in which, predictably, the Touareg feels most at home. Sure, if you fitted all the expensive extra dynamic gadgetry that we mentioned earlier, it's quite happy to attack a twisty series of bends in a reasonably spirited fashion, but you never sense that its heart is really in it. The slightly over-light steering doesn't help, nor when sharp throttle applications are needed does the slightly delayed reaction that you sometimes get from the 8-speed Tiptronic auto gearbox. That's a setup that favours you with steering-mounted paddles. There is a driving mode system, of course. The driver profile selection setup offers eco, comfort, normal and sport settings, plus an individual screen to set your own parameters. As usual with systems of this sort, these alter steering feel, throttle response, gear change timings and the ride quality, courtesy of the standard adaptive damping system. Unfortunately though, there's not the auto option that you'd really want on a car like this that would make all those decisions for you. You probably would try the more focused sport mode a few times in your first few weeks of ownership, and then you'd completely forget about it because the other settings suit the character of this car so much better. Its comfort zone lies in wafting about Range Rover style as you enjoy the commanding driving position, which combines with excellent all-round visibility to ensure this Touareg isn't as tricky to drive in town as you might expect a 2-metre wide large SUV would be. And particularly beyond the city limits, you'll enjoy exemplary refinement, helped by the fact that the build quality here is far better than, say, any Land Rover product. In fact, it's actually better than almost anything we can think of that's comparable. You'll be wanting to know about engines, which will almost certainly be of the 3-litre V6 TDI diesel variety, although other countries also get the mighty twin-turbo 4-litre V8 diesel, the 3-litre V6 petrol unit from the Cayenne, and the plug-in hybrid powertrain, which is slated for our market but wasn't offered here at launch. Here our focus is on the 3-litre V6 TDI diesel power plant, the same as that used in a rival Audi Q7, and the engine that most buyers would probably want, whatever the other options were on offer anyway. It's available here in 2 states of tune, 231 or 286 PS. Rest to 62 miles an hour occupies either 7.5 seconds or 6.1 seconds, depending on the variant you select. And if you regularly commute on de-restricted German autobahns, well, you'll be able to hit respective top speeds of either 135 or 146 miles an hour on your way to the office. Both power plant options deliver the same prodigious brake towing capacity too. This is one of the few passenger cars able to pull along up to 3.5 tonnes. The 286 PS unit we're trying here will tug its load more effortlessly, and that's thanks to a torque rise from 500 to 600 Newton meters. All the engines are mated to Volkswagen's 4-motion 4-wheel drive system, and that uses a centre differential lock capable of transferring up to 70% of torque to the front axle and up to 80% to the rear. Now this time around, the setup's been fully optimised for tarmac use, which means that unlike previous Touareg models, you can't specify this one with the kind of kit that you'd need for really serious off-roading, stuff like a low-range gearbox and a fully locking centre and rear differential. Hardly anyone took up the option of having that sort of kit with the previous generation model, and VW can no longer be bothered to offer it for the few folk who'd want it here. Still, this Mark III model Touareg remains significantly more capable off-piste than many of its segment contemporaries. As standard, the driver profile selection dial offers some extra 4-motion active control settings, off-road, off-road individual and snow. Plus the centre dash screen's vehicle section has a selectable inclinometer display, or you can have it show dials showing your current terrain inclination, a compass and a ground height above sea level. You can also specify an extra cost off-road pack, which adds a front underbody guard and 4 further 4-motion active control driving modes. Sand and gravel are self-explanatory, plus there's Off-Road Expert, which tweaks all the car's electronic systems specifically for off-piste use, and Off-Road Auto, which allows the car to decide for itself exactly how much of its systems should be orientated for use off the beaten track. Now, if you are going to be testing any of this out on the muddy stuff, it'll help enormously if you specify the optional air suspension. It's operable via this second rotary dial on the centre console. Now, with ordinary steel springing, you're limited to one standard 215mm level of ride height. With air suspension fitted, though, you have options. 2 options, actually. Twist the control dial to off-road, and you'll raise the ride height by 25mm. Turn it further to off-road plus, and you'll raise it by as much as 70 mils. Go for that second mode and it'll make quite a difference to your Touareg's ultimate off-road stats. The front and rear ramp angles, which would be rated at 25 degrees with steel suspension, are raised to 31 degrees, plus the breakover angle is raised from 18.5 to 25 degrees, and the maximum wading depth will be increased from 490 to 570 millimeters. The maximum gradient climbing angle, 60%, and traversing angle, which is 35 degrees, remain unaffected by your choice of suspension. None of which will be of much interest to a typical Touareg buyer. That's someone who'll be far more interested in this Volkswagen's tarmac-orientated technology. Maybe the IQ Light LED matrix headlights that adapt not only to the surrounding traffic but also to the weather and the topography of the road, and they feature a wider reach for high-speed highway use. There's also the way that this Touareg can drive, brake and steer itself at speeds of up to 37 miles an hour if the optional traffic jam assist feature is specified and activated for urban use. Many potential buyers will also like the trailer assist feature, which can help counter-steer anything you're towing into a tight space. And maybe also the optional night vision system, which uses a thermal image camera to register infrared radiation coming from people and animals, so as to display them more clearly after dark. It's all satisfyingly sophisticated, exactly as a modern, large, luxury SUV should be. With this third generation Touareg, Volkswagen design chief Klaus Bischoff's objective was clear: to shape the most imposing SUV in its class. Well, certainly distinctive, and now subtly larger too, longer, wider and fractionally lower than before. Like the previous Mark II version of this Volkswagen, this third generation car abandons the overtly off-road orientated DNA of the original Touareg in favour of more luxury orientated crossover cues. This time around though, there's an extrovert chromed front end that clearly plays to the important Chinese buyers that this Wolfsburg brand is most anxious to please. You'll either like that or you won't. We certainly haven't previously seen anything quite like the way that the chrome elements of this imposing grille combine in such a seamless way with this model's high-tech LED lighting system. And we'd want to consider these optional IQ Light LED matrix beam headlamps that feature 180 LEDs per headlight for optimum visibility, whatever the conditions. Silvered horizontal lines continue further down, culminating in a more overt silver bar across the lower air intake. It all emphasises this Mark III design's 44mm of extra width. Move to the side, and if you happen to be familiar with the previous Mark II model, you'll notice this replacement design's more swept-back rear roofline, and possibly also the addition of this sharp crease, which starts from this silver badge just behind the front wheel arch and extends above the door handles right back to the rear light clusters. This crease lower down separates wheels that are now a little larger in size. They range from 19 to the 21-inch rims that we have here, and this wide shoulder line emphasises the rear haunches. All models get standard roof rails, and R-line variants feature special sills and side skirts. The rear end's quite a bit sleeker too. Virtually the entire width is now filled by the boot lid. As before, there's a subtle roof spoiler, and R-line models get this gloss black lower diffuser with a long upper reflective strip. As usual though, what's more important is what lies beneath the panelwork, namely the MLM, modular longitudinal matrix platform that also underpins the Volkswagen Group's 4 other large luxury SUV models: the Audi Q7, the Porsche Cayenne, the Bentley Bentayga and the Lamborghini Urus. Now that has facilitated a stiffer body structure, 48% of which is fashioned from aluminium, and one that's lighter too, saving 106 kilos over the previous model and lowering this Touareg's curb weight to a point at or around the 2-ton mark. Okay, that's enough with the exterior. Time now to take a seat up front and experience the part of the car that we think might really sell it to you. Now this is, in Volkswagen's words, an interior shaped for the digital age, or at least it is in this top R-Line Tech variant anyway. That's the only model in the range that gets as standard what the brand calls its InnoVision cockpit package. Essentially, this set of digital instrument gauges and this super large so-called Discover Premium 15-inch centre dash display, both of which join seamlessly together to try to turn the fascia into one big functioning screen. Now we're going to get to that in a minute after we've observed that the quality and the classy ergonomics served up here take the Wolfsburg maker to a higher and more impressive level that's every bit the equal of its more exalted premium rivals. It helps that you sit more commandingly than is the case with some other large luxury SUVs, surrounded by mood lighting, beautifully stitched finishing and a cool, classy Teutonic ambience. But you're going to want to know about this screen setup. Most Touareg variants offer a rather different layout to this, with conventional instrument gauges and the smaller 9.2-inch Discover Pro centre dash display that Volkswagen offers in some of its humbler models. A system that includes most of what you'd want and also incorporates a limited amount of gesture control functionality. So is it worth paying more or stretching up to this top version for this InnoVision cockpit package? Well, perhaps. Now, Volkswagen seems to think that this kind of layout is in some way revolutionary, ignoring the fact that Mercedes has been offering it for some time. But this feels a touch different because the infotainment display in the middle of the fascia is quite a bit larger. Unfortunately, though, you don't get the kind of lower transmission tunnel mounted rotary or touchpad style controller that's provided with the rival Merc GLE or BMW X5, which allows you to more easily access different functions without taking your eyes off the road or needing to keep your hand hovering in mid-air in front of the screen. That aside, the InnoVision cockpit technology is difficult to fault unless you object to the way that the central monitor's glass frontage can quickly get covered with sticky fingerprints despite the application of a special surface coating. Its landscape layout works slightly better than a portrait-style format like that used by the screen fitted to the rival Volvo XC90, for example, because your eyes aren't constantly darting up and down all the time. And its gesture control element certainly works rather better than it does with the less exalted Discover Pro setup. Waving left or right in front of the monitor switches screens from radio settings to navigation, for example, and you can also gesture at the display to pause or skip your music. It's easy to get to grips with too, your starting point being this Apple-like lower central circle, which brings up a main menu with 4 left-hand tiles that can be personalised with the areas of functionality that you most commonly access. There's a further menu of features along the top of the screen, which expands when you bring your hand near to the monitor and swipe down. As usual in this segment, there are various online services, news, weather, parking, fuel station info and so on. But here, thanks to an integrated eSIM, these so-called CarNet options display without the need for you to integrate your phone, although with a WLAN wireless hotspot for up to 8 devices being one of the things included, you'll probably want to. There is smartphone mirroring too, although when you use it, the Apple CarPlay screen looks ridiculously small within this monitor's frame. Many of the Discover Premium Setup's infotainment features can also be found on this separate 12-inch instrument binnacle screen, which separates its 2 main virtual dials with a central display that shows navigation mapping, driving data, safety system functionality, audio or phone readouts, or even if fitted, an infrared display from the optional night vision system. Now, whatever you've selected, if you need to see more, a tap of this steering wheel button, which says View, expands that central part of the monitor to take up the whole screen. Now, we suggest you pay the extra for the optional head-up display, so you can do that while still keeping the main elements of speed and driving data in plain sight. As I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult indeed to fault the way the front of the cabin's been laid out, and it's certainly easy to find a supportive driving position, especially if your chosen Touareg has these 14-way power-adjustable ergo comfort seats, and they're here supplied with the standard Vienna leather swapped out for an even nicer Savona spec version of the same upholstery. There's no power adjustment option for the wheel, which does look rather too much like the one you get in the Golf, but like the seat, it offers a wide degree of movement and it feels good to hold. All-round visibility is fine. These rotary dials on the transmission tunnel for adjusting air suspension and the various driving modes are simple to use, and there's plenty of cabin storage. These twin cup holders by the gear stick ought to be concealed by a sliding cover of the sort that you do get at the base of the centre stack, covering this area, which provides USB and 12-volt ports, plus an optional wireless phone charging mat. There's no overhead compartment for your sunglasses, but you do get a compartment by the driver's right knee, netted storage in the passenger footwell, a shallow covered box here between the seats with a further USB port. Oh, and decent sizing for the glove box and for the deep door bins, which include bottle holders. Enough on the front. What's it like in the back? Well, you'd think that the 77mm of extra body length this time around would have prompted Volkswagen's designers to allow for the option of extra cost third row chairs, particularly as the brand continues to deny European countries the huge 7-seat Atlas SUV it offers in other markets. As it is, the previous 5-seat only format remains. Don't get us wrong, no one was really wanting this Touareg to become a fully fledged 7-seater like, say, the rival Audi Q7, which is almost 80mm longer. But it does seem odd that Volkswagen's ignored the way that most 5-seat orientated rivals in this segment now do offer boot-mounted seats as an option. Still, staying with the 5-seat format allows for a palatial level of rear seat space for the passengers you can take. Legroom's generous and it can be extended further by seat bases that slide over a range of 160mm over a 60-40 split. Headroom's ample too, despite this third generation model's reduction of 7mm in roof height. And that's even if you get yourself a model fitted with this vast opening panoramic roof, which floods the interior with welcome light. It's the largest glass top that Volkswagen's ever designed, 1270mm long and 825mm wide, with an electrical section that can be moved back by 495mm. The seat backs recline in 3 stages, back to an angle of up to 21 degrees for greater comfort on longer journeys, and the relatively low height of this centre transmission tunnel means that 3 adults can be accommodated without too much discomfort for the occupant who's drawn the short straw and gets stuck in the middle. Folk back here are favoured with seat back nets and deep pockets in the doors, which feature classy vodka bar style translucent lighting strips that, with the optional ambient light pack fitted, change in shade according to the driver's selection from 30 colours. A centre armrest provides extra cup holders, and over the transmission tunnel, a fold-down centre panel reveals 12-volt and USB ports. There are twin vents, and if you've opted for the 4-zone climate system we have here, separate digital temperature and fan controls for the back seats too. Let's finish by taking a look at the boot, and that's another area of the car that you might think would have benefited by the decision not to allow for a third seating row. The rear tailgate is power operated with a gesture control feature, of course, or at least it is if you avoid entry-level trim. And once it's raised, there is, sure enough, a significantly larger luggage area than before. It's rated at 810 litres in size, and that's a useful 113 litres larger than the previous generation model could offer. To give you a bit of segment perspective, this area is 15 litres smaller than the boot offered by a Mercedes GLE, but it's 40 litres bigger than the trunk of an Audi Q7, and there's a massive 165 litres more room here than you get from a rival BMW X5. It's easy to get stuff in thanks to the low loading lip, and with the assistance of rear seat passengers, there's the option to vary the boot space on offer thanks to 1400mm of load space width, the sliding rear bench, and the way that you can make the seat backs more vertical. Now, if you've specified your Touareg with air suspension, you'll get these controls on the right-hand side of the cargo area that allow you to select a lower load ride height, which is 40mm closer to the deck, so lumping in heavier stuff will be easier. The controls for the optional electrically retracting tow bar also reside here. There's also a 12-volt socket, there's a couple of pull-out bag hooks, and 4 chromed tie-down points. You even get a bit of extra underfloor storage around the spare wheel, even if you specify the optional Dynaudio audio system, which needs this additional subwoofer. If you need more space, your first option is to make use of the fact that the rear backrest has a 40-20-40 split, so freeing up the central part to flatten for the carriage of long items like skis without disturbing a couple of rear-seated passengers. If that's not enough, though, you can operate these useful sidewall mounted catches to retract the full backrest. Now, unfortunately, it's one of those that doesn't automatically go flat when it first falls, and that forces you to go around to the side door and click it down into its final position. Even then, actually, it isn't quite flat. Nonetheless, a useful 1,800 litres of total capacity can be freed up in this configuration. You'll need a budget in the £50,000 to £60,000 bracket for Touareg ownership, and that's pretty standard for the large SUV class. The available trim levels kick off with base SEL spec with around £3,500 more, getting you sportier looking mid-range R-Line spec. Spend about £6,500 more over the cost of SEL trim and you can get yourself the top spec R-Line Tech variant that we're trying here, and that's the one that you'll need for this model's most noteworthy interior feature, the InnoVision cockpit screens. For this flagship derivative, you'll be spending in the £55,000 to £60,000 bracket, but as we'll see in a moment, that could still see you spending a little less than would be necessary to own comparable versions of obvious rivals. Now, whichever of the three spec levels are chosen, almost all Touareg buyers will be looking at two versions of the 3-litre V6 TDI diesel engine, a base 231 PS unit, or for £2,600 more, a 286 PS version of that power plant. Either way, it'll come mated to 4-motion 4-wheel drive and an 8-speed Tiptronic auto gearbox. Let's take a look at how this kind of pricing positions this model in its segment, which we'll evaluate on the basis of your choosing the more popular 286 PS variant that we're testing here. Now, to start with, it makes sense to look at rival large segment SUV models like this Volkswagen are primarily 5-seated format. This Touareg undercuts a rival BMW X5 or Mercedes GLE by around £7,000. An equivalent V6 diesel-powered Maserati Levante is about £10,000 more, and for a comparably performing Range Rover Sport SDV6 or Audi Q8 50 TDI, you'd be looking at needing to find over £15,000 more. In fact, if you're looking for a 3-litre diesel-powered 5-seat SUV in this class, only Jeep's ageing Grand Cherokee is cheaper than this VW, and even then, not by much. Now, we haven't so far mentioned the Porsche Cayenne, which shares much of this Volkswagen's engineering. And that's because these days that car can't be ordered with a diesel engine, although you could have it with petrol-electric plug-in hybrid power if you were prepared to find another £8,000 over the cost of a base Touareg. Now, talking of petrol-electric hybrids in this segment, Lexus offers its non-plug-in RX 450h at pricing which is only fractionally less than what Volkswagen's asking here. If you're prepared to look at the two key 7-seat contenders in this class, Volvo's XC90 and Audi's Q7, then you'll need to think in terms of having to find around £2,000 more than you'd have to pay for equivalent versions of this Touareg. A comparable 3-litre V6 diesel Land Rover Discovery is around £5,000 more. And entry-level Touareg money will only get you a mid-spec version of Toyota's ponderous Land Cruiser, and that's an SUV with considerably less power. If, having considered all these options, you decide it is a Touareg that you really want, then you'll need to know exactly how generous Volkswagen has been when it comes to the standard specification. And the answer is that this car has been generously specified across a range, which includes, as standard on all models, DCC, dynamic chassis control, adaptive damping, so you can tweak the ride to suit driving setting preferences, which are dialed in via the standard driver profile selection driving mode system. There are also separate 4-motion active control driving modes for off-road use. Plus, there's standard ACC adaptive cruise control, which uses a radar sensor distance monitoring system to automatically keep you a safe distance behind the vehicle in front at highway speeds. Now, the incorporated predictive cruise feature, now that can automatically modulate your speed according to the road signs, and it can predict those signs based on GPS data. Plus, of course, there's plenty else. Even the base SEL version comes with 19-inch alloy wheels, full LED headlamps and tail lamps, front and rear parking sensors, power folding electric heated mirrors, heated windscreen washer jets, auto headlamps and wipers, roof rails and an alarm. Surprisingly though, you don't get a powered tailgate at this level. Inside you'll find Vienna black leather seats that are heated at the front, cruise control, 2-zone climate control, and that also includes a glove box, an auto-dimming rear view mirror and a multifunction leather trimmed steering wheel. In-car infotainment, meanwhile, is taken care of by a Discover Navigation Pro media setup, and that's accessible via a large 9.2-inch colour touchscreen. This includes gesture control, allowing common functions to be activated with just a twirl of your finger. Plus, the package includes a 64GB hard drive, 3D mapping, voice control, an SD card reader, and traffic sign recognition, along with Volkswagen's CarNet App Connect package, and that allows you to link in your smartphone via the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and MirrorLink systems. Also standard is the brand's CarNet Guide and Inform setup, and that gives you in-car online access to a whole range of useful journeying information. Everything really, from traffic news to information on fuel and parking prices in your place of destination. And you get the CarNet Security and Service package, which integrates your Touareg with a Volkswagen call centre, and that can provide emergency assistance plus breakdown and service notification. In addition, you'll get a special app which will allow you to remotely lock and unlock the car and access driving information from it from wherever you are. Should you pay the extra to upgrade to sportier R-Line spec? Well, most Touareg buyers tend to. The package certainly gives this car much more of a stylish demeanour, including, as it does, larger 20-inch wheels, lowered sports suspension and a smarter look, courtesy of a body styling kit with side skirts and side sills, plus gloss black finishing for the front air intake and the rear diffuser. Inside you get gloss black decorative inlays, stainless steel pedals, a heated R-Line leather stitch steering wheel with paddle shifters, a rear view camera and a park assist system to steer you into spaces. Plus there's a powered tailgate too, a wireless smartphone charger, extra USB points, branded door sill protectors, there's an electrically operated luggage compartment cover and 4-zone climate control with separate zones for those at the rear. Now that only leaves this top R-Line Tech variant, and that's the one you'd ideally want. Now the key feature here is the clever InnoVision cockpit we mentioned earlier, and that's an expensive option on the other models. Now this replaces the conventional instrument binnacle dials with a 12-inch TFT digital display, and it expands the centre dash infotainment screen to 15 inches in size. These two things together turning, well, virtually the entire fascia into one functioning screen. As you expect, the incorporated Discover Premium infotainment setup is a bit more tech savvy than the lesser Discover Navigation Pro package. So you get self-learning navigation, which anticipates your needs, and so-called Nav Gen 4 routing, which alters route calculations, taking into account traffic conditions. There's also a built-in eSIM, which ensures that mobile online services, including those for news and weather, can work without a smartphone. And the audio system is of the hybrid radio variety, and that means that it can combine terrestrial and internet radio signals for the best possible sound. Other specific R-Line Tech features include Nevada black diamond turned 20-inch alloy wheels, keyless entry, 4-way adjustable front head restraints, and more supportive R-Line branded 14-way power adjustable ergo comfort front seats with memory settings. On to options. Now, we've already referenced the fact that the InnoVision cockpit package costs extra further down the range, but we can't see many Touareg buyers taking up this option. Customers of the base SEL variants probably won't want to find the necessary £2,500 or so for it, while if you added that amount onto the cost of a mid-range R-Line model, well, you get to the point where you might as well have chosen this R-Line Tech variant. As for other extras, well, this particular car is fitted up with some key technology features that quite a few Touareg owners might potentially be interested in. There's a head-up display, for example, and the clever IQ Light LED matrix beam headlights, which use navigation data and light sensing technology to adapt their beams to suit road topography and traffic conditions. We'd be less interested, though, in the night vision system we've been trying here, which uses a thermal imaging camera to register infrared radiation emitted by people or animals, displaying them on the digital cockpit screen. It's the first time that a system like that's ever been fitted to a Volkswagen model. For a really assured, dynamic, on-tarmac driving demeanour in this Touareg, there are two options. The first thing you want to look at is the air suspension with rear axle steering system that we've been trying here. Now, this is basically the same package as you'll find on a Lamborghini Urus, costing £100,000 more. And it's one that'll just waft you over broken tarmac. It'll provide sharper corner turning and easier low-speed manoeuvrability. If you can afford further spend in making your Touareg an even more accomplished tarmac tool, then you'll want to opt for the professional chassis pack. Now, with this, the same air suspension with rear axle steering package is matched to an active anti-roll bar setup for the front and rear axles, and that dramatically reduces cornering body roll. And it's the same setup that Bentley uses on its Bentayga. As for off-piste orientated stuff, well, Volkswagen hasn't provided this third-generation Touareg with the low-range gearbox option that its predecessors did have, because less than 5% of previous buyers took that up. But if you are planning to head off the beaten track in this car, you can get an optional off-road pack. Now, this includes a front underbody guard and some additional off-road driving modes: off-road auto, sand, gravel and off-road expert. Now, as part of this pack, you also get the larger 90-litre fuel tank that we'd particularly want, and that's something that, if required, can also be ordered separately. OK, enough of that. What if your priority simply lies in giving your chosen Touareg model even more luxury? Well, if budget permitted, we'd be tempted to spend more on things like a panoramic glass roof, an ambient lighting pack which bathes the cabin in your choice of colours, a heated front climate windscreen which accelerates defrosting and prevents fogging, cooled active front climate seats that feature a massage function, headlamp washers, upgraded Savona R-Line leather upholstery, and the 730-watt 14-speaker Dynaudio Consequence premium sound pack. You might also want heated rear seats and laminated rear privacy glass. Bear in mind that with the Volume SEL and R-Line models, you'll also have to pay more for keyless entry and for the more supportive powered Ergo Comfort front seats. Bear in mind that you're also probably going to be paying your Volkswagen dealer extra for your chosen paint colour. Solid pure white is the only one that comes as standard. Otherwise, there are various metallic, pearl effect, ultra metallic and premium signature shades. We have the silicon grey metallic one here. As usual, you can also upgrade the wheels. We've got the largest available 21-inch Suzuka dark graphite diamond turned rims here. If you really must, side running boards can be fitted, and if you still think there's not enough silver finishing on this car, you can add a rear chrome strip. As for practical stuff, well, you're probably going to want to add in a few things that'll help you make the most of the vast boot space. The cargo management system with its movable bars and restraining net would be useful, and this package will come included if you go for the reversible boot floor mat. There's also a package that gives you the reversible mat together with a net partition to separate the cargo bay from the passenger area, and you can also specify a luggage compartment tray to protect the boot floor. Rear side window blinds, they're optional, plus your dealer has the usual load bars and attachments for roof boxes, bicycles, skis and snowboards, along with rear bumper protection film to protect against luggage scrapes, and also the usual mud flaps and rubber floor mats if you want those. And you also might want to add in the power folding tow bar that we have here. And that can also be ordered in a package which will give you Volkswagen's clever trailer assist system. Now that will be an absolute boon if, like us, you struggle with reversing trailers or caravans into tight spaces. With trailer assist, your reversing steering direction can be controlled via a joystick, the mirror adjustment switch, from inside the car, and you follow steering angles that are shown in the instrument cluster. On to safety, and that's an area in which Volkswagen has moved on quite a bit with this model. Now, predictably, there's a full roster of sophisticated standard camera-driven safety kit. The ACC adaptive cruise control that, as we said earlier, is fitted across the range, has a predictive feature which draws on navigation data to anticipate road conditions and traffic flow. The Touareg's lane assist feature will sound a warning if you drift out of your lane on the highway before subtly steering the car back to where it ought to be. Now, this feature automatically activates every time you start the car, and that means that there is the annoyance of having to keep turning it off if you don't like it. Now, apparently, this intrusive functionality gained Volkswagen an extra half a star on the Euro NCAP tests. Now, as you'd expect these days from a luxury car, there's standard autonomous braking. The Wolfsburg maker calls its system front assist, and just like other similar setups, this one will scan the road ahead as you drive for potential accident hazards, and then it'll warn you if one's detected, and it will automatically brake if necessary. For specific help of this sort at urban speeds, you have the backup of city emergency braking. Now that works at under 19 miles an hour, and again, it's there to boost brake pressure so as to help prevent an accident. In addition, as we mentioned earlier, there's a traffic sign recognition feature which pictures speed signs as you pass them and then displays them on the dash. And you get a driver alert system which monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness and then prompts you to stop for a restorative coffee if it detects lethargy. This top R-Line Tech variant gets standard high beam assist too, and that's a feature which is optional on the other variants, and it's able to automatically dip the headlights at night in the face of oncoming traffic. In addition, across the range, the Wolfsburg brand has installed a clever automatic post-collision braking system. Now that will automatically brake the car down to 6 miles an hour after a collision. So if, say, someone hits you and, understandably, you go to pieces, the car will automatically sort itself out. As for more expected safety stuff, well, of course, all Touaregs get twin front, side and curtain airbags, although there's no driver's knee bag. And in addition, there are ISOFIX child seat fastenings and anti-whiplash front head restraints. There's a tyre pressure loss indicator too, although a full tyre pressure monitoring system with a proper dash display costs extra. Other standard safety features include ESC stability control, an ASR traction control system and an electronic differential lock. Now that is there to facilitate smooth starts on split friction road surfaces. Let's say if one side of the car is on wet leaves, for example. In addition, there's ABS Plus anti-lock braking, and panic stops are advertised to following motorists by automatically activating hazard warning lights. The hill descent control system makes use of ABS functionality. That's at low speeds. It works to ease you down steep, slippery slopes. Hill hold assist will stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and there's also an active bonnet, the rear edge of which rises instantly to minimise head injuries in the nightmare scenario of an impact with a pedestrian or a cyclist. Now, we should also reiterate the importance of the CarNet security and service package, which is incorporated into both the Discover infotainment systems. Now, as I said earlier, this provides an e-call service which automatically alerts the emergency services should the airbags go off in an accident. If you want to go further with safety provision, then your dealer will suggest that you add in the extra cost Driver's Assistance Pack Plus option that we've been trying here, and that includes 6 additional camera-driven features. So let's talk you through those. Now, first off, there's Predictive Pedestrian Protection, and that's a system that specifically searches for pedestrians who might be just about to step out in front of you, and if necessary, it can initiate braking to avoid them. Next, let's tell you about Traffic jam assist. Now that allows this Volkswagen to drive itself in low-speed traffic queues at up to 37 miles an hour, and it uses the previously mentioned lane assist technology to keep the car in lane. Now that does sound futuristic, but if you have to regularly commute in stop-and-go traffic, that is a feature that you'll really come to depend on. And thirdly, there's the useful side scan feature, and that's a blind spot monitor that warns you if you're just about to pull out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot. There are 3 other features in that optional Driver's Assistance Pack Plus package, and they're all pretty significant. Take front cross traffic assist, for example. That works when you're coming out of junctions, driveways or parking spaces, and it warns you of vehicles approaching from either side, and it's able to automatically initiate emergency braking if you don't react. If despite all this you do go on to have a collision, then you'll be glad of the proactive occupant protection system. Now that uses the front assist autonomous braking system sensors to sense when an impact is imminent, and then it braces the car to better withstand it by instantly closing all the windows, and if it's fitted, the sunroof too. And finally, emergency assist is a setup that uses the adaptive cruise control system that we mentioned earlier, and it works on the move to sense a situation where the driver has stopped operating the controls. I mean, perhaps he or she has been taken ill, for example. Now, if that's the case, then after a series of warnings, the electronics will gradually move the car into the left-hand lane, and it'll bring it to a safe, controlled stop, with all the while flashing hazard warning lights to alert following motorists. Automotive brands across the world have been racking their brains over the last few years for ways to make large luxury SUVs like this one a little more efficient. Most rivals to this Touareg have turned to plug-in electric powertrains as a solution in this regard. Technology the Volkswagen Group has too, and which it uses in the Audi Q7, the Porsche Cayenne and the Bentley Bentayga models that share this car's engineering. It was a bit surprising then not to see a petrol-electric option offered to European Touareg buyers from launch, particularly as the previous Mark II model had it way back in 2010. Still, the 3-litre V6 TDI diesel units that most customers will choose with this car seem at first glance to be reasonably efficient by today's standards, in both states of tune, managing 42.8 mpg on the combined cycle and 173 grams per kilometre of CO2. That is, though, about 10% off the prevailing standard in this segment, which is a bit surprising given that one of the models setting that standard is the Audi Q7, which shares pretty much the same engine and curb weight as this car. For the longest driving range between service station stops, you'll have to pay your dealer a bit extra to get the standard 75-litre fuel tank replaced by the bigger 90-litre one. Now, the figures we've just quoted, by the way, are the ones Volkswagen gave us, calculated on the new WLTP test cycle, but converted back to the most recent NEDC 2.0 spec, since that's what a lot of rival models are still using. If you need to do better than that in your Touareg, then talk to your dealer about the availability of that plug-in petrol-electric powertrain, which promises a 30-mile all-electric driving range and CO2 emissions of less than 70 grams per kilometre. Now, because every version of this Volkswagen costs over £40,000, a standard annual road tax rate of £450 will apply. And across the diesel range, you're looking at a benefit-in-kind taxation rating of 37%. Helping with all the quoted readings are all the usual eco-minded features that you now expect to see on this kind of a car. Regenerative battery charging to reclaim energy that would otherwise be lost under braking, and a start-stop system to cut the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or when you're waiting at the lights. And you also get the benefit of Volkswagen's latest DSG transmission technology too, which includes a coasting function, which at cruising speeds will disconnect the gearbox, leaving the engine to idle until you next need it. Of course, in achieving optimum running cost returns, the driver needs to do his or her part too. To help with that, there's a gear change recommendation feature in the instrument binnacle display, and as part of the driver profile selection system, there's a selectable eco setting which focuses all the car systems on ultimate frugality. There's also a convenience consumers section in the centre dash screen that allows you to check on the way that the air conditioning and the ventilated seats are draining the battery. Can you be bothered with all this though? Well, if you can't, it's no good complaining that the quoted running cost figures don't match those you actually achieve. The other cost-related facts surrounding this Volkswagen, though, are rather more straightforward. Now, you wouldn't expect an aspiring premium brand model to achieve residual values quite as high as those of the established players, but nevertheless, this Wolfsburg contender doesn't do too badly. Experts Quick Car Cost reckon that after 3 years and 60,000 miles, a volume 3-litre TDI 286 PS version of this Touareg would be worth around 37.03% of its original asking price. Experts Quick Car Cost reckon that after 3 years and 60,000 miles, a volume 3-litre TDI 286 PS version of this Touareg will be worth around 37.03% of its original asking price. We should give you a feel for the potential insurance costings too. With the 231 PS model, you're looking at group ratings of either 38E, 39E or 40E, depending on your respective selection between SEL, R-Line or R-Line Tech levels of trim. For this 286 PS variant, the respective ratings are group 41E for the first two trim levels and 42E if you go for this R-Line Tech derivative. As for servicing, well, as usual with Volkswagen models, there's a choice of either fixed or flexible maintenance packages. Now, you choose the fixed approach if you cover less than 10,000 miles a year, and with this, the car will typically be looked at every 12 months. If, however, your daily commute is more than 25 miles and your Touareg will regularly be driven over long distance journeys, then you'll be able to work with the flexible regime, which can see you travelling up to 18,000 miles between garage visits or every 2 years, whichever is sooner. The TDI engines, like most modern diesel power plants, get a selective catalytic reduction filter to cut down on nitrous oxide, and as with similar rival units, they're designed around the injection of a urea-based solution called AdBlue into the exhaust gas stream to help clean up the emissions. The liquid used is stored in a 12-litre tank, and that's mounted at the rear beneath the boot, and that will need topping up as part of regular servicing. What else? Warranties. Well, the standard package is 3 years and 60,000 miles. We can't really see why Volkswagen couldn't extend that mileage limit to 100,000 miles, though, since that's what's on offer with its mechanically very similar LCV models. Doing that, though, of course, wouldn't give Volkswagen dealers so much of an opportunity to sell extended warranty packages. There's one for 4 years and 75,000 miles, or if you plan to see a bit more of the world in your Touareg, there's a 5-year, 90,000 mile package too. Whatever your decision, your car will come with 3 years of pan-European roadside assistance, and that has no mileage limit. The paintwork warranty lasts for 3 years, and as you'd expect, this model is protected by a 12-year anti-corrosion guarantee. Can a large Volkswagen ever be truly prestigious and desirable? Well, the Phaeton never quite managed to offer that kind of feel, nor today does the Arteon. But this Mark III model Touareg is more comfortable without ever being in any way exclusive. Now, the ritzier, more exotic premium large SUVs from the Volkswagen Group, which share this car's engineering, will suit you better if that's what you want. The truth is, though, that this Touareg is good enough to be considered alongside any one of them. The previous model's unpretentious approach was arguably one of its biggest draws, so this time around, the decision that this car should make more of a visual statement was somewhat controversial, but the Touareg needed a bit of extra stylistic appeal, and over time, we think the sleeker, chromed profile of this third-generation design might really grow on you. Now, we're not entirely sure that the InnoVision cockpit digital display package represents quite the step forward that Volkswagen thinks it does, but many models will be doing without that anyway, and technology aside, the finish and the quality of the cabin is really hard to fault, whatever your expectations of luxury in this segment. Of course, a cynic might ask in what way this car is class leading, and it'd be tough to pinpoint one. Even with the optional air suspension, the four-wheel steering and the active anti-roll bar packages fitted, it's still not the most dynamic on-road performer that you could choose in this class, and it's certainly possible to buy cheaper large SUVs, which will take you a bit further off the beaten track. If, though, your priorities don't lie with either of those two extremes, then we still think that you'll find much to like here. Think of this Volkswagen as an artful exercise in the management of compromise. An SUV that delivers its many virtues with a level of polished precision that makes it hard not to like. Of course, to want one, you're going to be one of those people who can't see the point of fitting a third seating row into their large SUV. And we can't help thinking it would have been wise for Volkswagen to engineer in this option and then offer it at extra cost, as BMW, Mercedes, Lexus and the Range Rover brand do with their models in this segment. But, of course, the Volkswagen Group conglomerate has the similarly priced Audi Q7 to offer that. Probably they don't care which one you buy, but it was important that these two products should have their own individual distinct appeal. The Touareg now does, and we can see why the right kind of buyer might really like it.